girl named Savina, holding her sick mother's hand as tears stream down her face. She's sad, wondering how things came to this point. With her dad gone and her mom falling ill, she can't bear the thought of losing her too. Before she leaves, she tells her mom to hold on a little longer, promising to save her. Savina enters the Charlotte house. A butler knocks on Benjamin Charlotte's office door. Benjamin invites the butler in. The butler informs him that someone is here to see him. Seeing Savina, Benjamin misunderstands, questioning why there's a maid when he didn't advertise for one. The butler hesitates to explain, but Savina interrupts confidently, clarifying that she's not there to become a maid. Savina places a necklace on Ben's table. Ben is surprised to see it and reflects on it. Savina thinks to herself that he must know what it is, as it belonged to her dad, Liam Charlotte. Ben asks for her mother's name. Savina replies that her mother's name is Renata, and she used to work there as a maid. Ben understands and comments that it must have been a great love after all. He then dismisses the butler, who bows and leaves. Ben asks Savina how her mother has been doing since Liam died. Savina responds that, like many single mothers in the Empire, her mother has faced a lot of hardship living in poverty. She believes that most people would pity her upon hearing this, but the members of the Charlotte family would likely laugh and say that they deserved it, especially since her mother was a maid. Savina is concerned but realizes that this is the only place she can turn to for help. She knows she must do whatever she can to help her mother recover from her illness. Savina pleads for help, explaining that her mother is ill and she hopes they will save her. Ben twitches and then adopts a stern tone, questioning if she truly expects him to help after the history between their families. He recounts the loss their family suffered when Liam ran away with her mother, resulting in the loss of the family's heir and Ben's older brother. He sees no reason for House Charlotte to assist her mother. Savina counters by reminding him that she is his older brother's only child, suggesting that having a member of the Charlotte bloodline nearby might bring him comfort. She promises to move in and live quietly if they save her mother, cutting ties with everyone she used to know. Ben questions Savina, making sure she understands the consequences of her proposal, mentioning that she would never see her mother again. Savina stares at Ben, indicating her preparedness for such a sacrifice. Ben flinches, unable to respond. He then asks for her name and age. Savina replies that her name is Savina and she is 8 years old. Ben decides that from now on, she will be known as Savina Roald Charlotte. He assures her that he will save her mother and reminds her not to forget the significance of her name, akin to what her father once did. The butler informs Savina's grandfather about everything. The grandfather asks if Liam's daughter came. The butler nervously apologizes for not bringing her there first, citing concern for the grandfather's health. The grandfather dismisses it, expressing disinterest in meeting Liam's daughter, as he considers Liam a foolish son who disappointed him. In a flashback, Liam argues with his father, defending his choices. The grandfather condemns Liam for bringing shame to the family by falling for a commoner, warning him that he will come to regret his actions. The grandfather reflects on Liam's departure, stating that Liam will struggle once he leaves home and will eventually seek forgiveness and return. He acknowledges that it has already been 13 years since Liam left. 3 years pass. Among the maids, one named Melissa asks if everything is finished. Another maid questions Melissa's presence, to which Melissa explains that she needed to escape the tense atmosphere in the dining room. She mentions how strict the previous Duke Charlotte is with Lady Savina, making even the maids nervous during mealtimes. Another maid advises Melissa to ignore it, as the Duke treats Lady Savina poorly all the time. They discuss why the previous Duke Charlotte dislikes his granddaughter, considering Lady Savina a failure as a Charlotte. Melissa asks for clarification on what that means. The maid explains that House Charlotte has a remarkable power of water magic inherited through their bloodline, making everyone in the family born with the ability. While the current Duke is highly talented, Savina's father was also exceptional. People expected Savina to be as skilled as both of them, but she showed no signs of possessing the family's power even after turning 10, the usual age for the ability to manifest. This led to speculation that her lack of magical ability was due to having the blood of a lowborn commoner. During the meal, Savina's grandfather calls out to her, startling her. He questions why she always wears the same clothes despite having enough money for clothing, expressing concern about people mocking House Charlotte because of it. Nervously, Savina promises to be more careful. She reflects that her grandfather was the one who criticized her every time she tried on a new outfit. She's no longer surprised, as this treatment has become routine since she moved into the manor. She understands that being kind to the illegitimate child left behind by his dead son is unlikely. Ben informs his grandfather that the prince will arrive soon and considers letting him use the bedroom at the end of the corridor on the second floor of the main building. The grandfather acknowledges the honor of the queen entrusting the prince's education to their family and instructs Ben to welcome him hospitably. Ben agrees to his father's directive. The grandfather instructs Savina that her bedroom will be relocated to the annex for the time being. He tells her not to come near the main building when the prince arrives and to stay out of sight. He advises her to introduce herself as just a servant working at the manor if she happens to run into the prince. Savina reflects on the situation, unable to believe that her grandfather doesn't want to show the noble prince his granddaughter who has a commoner mother. She realizes she can't even introduce herself as part of the family. With sadness, she responds affirmatively to her grandfather. Savina reflects on the situation, acknowledging that being treated poorly is not new to her. She reminds herself that she's there for her mom's treatment and can handle being ignored. The grandfather then turns to Ben to conclude their discussion about the fifth Prince Ricardo. Savina is shocked and anxious, unable to believe what she heard about the fifth Prince Ricardo. She quickly fibs about feeling unwell due to indigestion and asks to be excused. The grandfather grants her request and Savina bows, thanking him for his understanding before leaving. Savina, feeling fearful, reflects on the name Ricardo. It's the same name as the psychopath prince in the book her friend wrote. Initially, she thought she had been reborn. She recalls hearing others talk about the prince, mentioning how he's different from other children. According to a relative working at the imperial palace, the fifth prince doesn't hesitate to kill animals when he hunts, almost enjoying the sight of blood. While some dismiss it as rumors, others find his eyes quite frightening. Savina ponders the similarities between what people are saying about the prince and how characters are introduced in books, especially the description of the prince. She scoffs at the idea of being reborn as a character in a book, deeming it impossible. However, she acknowledges that the mistreatment she faces as an illegitimate child in a prominent noble family, and the fact that the fifth Prince Ricardo will stay there for a while are strikingly similar to the situation depicted in the book. The main character of the novel, The Chronicles of Casario, is Ricardo Gal de Casario. He endured a torturous childhood as an unwanted prince and was banished to the battlefield to fight monsters as soon as he became an adult. There, he met and was saved by the female lead, who was also a saint. The male protagonist ultimately succeeded in defeating the great demon, became the next emperor, married the saint with everyone's blessing, and lived happily ever after. Savina, in her previous life, hearing this, tells her friend that the male lead isn't charming enough and suggests that a good guy who had a tough childhood might be a little boring for a male lead these days. Her friend asks for suggestions on what kind of changes she should make. Savina advises her friend, suggesting that the male protagonist must be cool no matter what. She proposes that he appears perfect in every way but lacks emotions, and it's the female lead who will make him feel things through love. Her friend questions why Savina has a bigger role in the plot than the female lead. She explains that it's due to a plot detail stating that the male lead is supposed to be traumatized after Savina dies. She suggests having the male lead kill Savina himself, turning him into a psychopath with no emotions. Her friend agrees, thinking it's a good idea. Savina is frustrated with her friend for changing the plot based on her advice. She insists that her friend should be proud of her work and shouldn't alter the novel's storyline just because of someone else's suggestion. Savina expresses concern for the protagonist, who now has to become a psychopath. Suddenly, Savina wakes up from the dream feeling scared. She recalls the dream vividly and remembers the name Ricardo Gal de Casario. She realizes that her friend changed her novel based on her advice, resulting in a darker storyline akin to Ricardo's cold-hearted personality. Savina reflects on her fate, knowing she was reborn with the destiny of being killed by that prince. Savina's friend reflects on her initial happiness when her book became popular after changing the plot. However, she's shocked to realize that Savina was reborn as a character in the novel. She speculates that Savina lacked magical talent because she's not the real Savina. Despite this, Savina feels anxious, knowing that the fifth prince is coming and she has a situation to deal with. She wonders if there's a way to prevent the events of the novel from happening. Fearful of the scary prince, she desperately searches for a way to avoid her fate and survive. Just then, a lady bursts through the door into Savina's room, startling her. The lady demands to know why Savina wasn't in the classroom and if she knows what time it is. Savina is surprised but recognizes the voice as Madame Clarissa. Nervously, Savina tries to explain that today's class was scheduled for later. Madame Clarissa informs her that the afternoon class was moved to the morning. Savina realizes that no one informed her of the change and notes that it's only 7 o'clock, which seems too early for a morning class. However, she decides not to protest the situation. Savina takes her seat as instructed by Madame Clarissa. Madame Clarissa explains that she is simply educating Savina in accordance with the previous Duke's instructions. Savina reflects on the situation, knowing that her grandfather, the previous Duke Charlotte, put Madame Clarissa in charge of her education. She acknowledges that her grandfather's irrational concern about her education gave Madame Clarissa more power as a teacher, making her words law in their lessons. Savina realizes that if someone is trying to push her to her breaking point, Madame Clarissa is the most ideal person for the job. Savina reflects that Madame Clarissa did an excellent job of helping her catch up on all her courses in just 3 years. However, she doesn't believe it's because Madame Clarissa taught well or because she's a great teacher. She suspects that Madame Clarissa is waiting for her to make mistakes. As Clarissa instructs her to pour the tea into the cup, Savina complies, finding the task simple. As Savina pours the tea perfectly, Clarissa can't endure the sight, indicating her dissatisfaction. Clarissa twitches, demanding Savina to pour more tea into the large cup. Startled, Savina can't believe she's being asked to fill the cup even more. Clarissa, with a frustrated expression, insists that Savina pours more, yelling for her to do so. Savina fills the teacup to the brim, feeling overwhelmed by its weight. She realizes that Clarissa is doing everything she can to find fault with her. As Savina lifts the cup, her hand shivers, fearing she'll spill it. Clarissa, unsatisfied, hits Savina's hand with a stick, yelling that her fingers are too high. The maid gasps in shock, but Savina endures the situation. Concerned for Savina, the maid rushes to her side, asking if she's all right and offering a damp towel. Panicked, the maid tries to assist Savina. Meanwhile, Clarissa smirks at Savina's situation, commenting that Savina should have done it the way she was taught. Angered, Savina forcefully puts the teacup on the table, startling Clarissa. Savina glares at Clarissa with anger. Clarissa, taken aback by Savina's rebellious look, questions her expression. Savina responds defiantly, stating that she doesn't think that's what Clarissa is supposed to say. Clarissa accuses Savina, expressing disbelief and insinuating that Savina is trying to blame her for the mistake. Clarissa scoffs at Savina, suggesting that if she were a real member of the Charlotte family, she could have easily avoided such accidents. Annoyed, Savina contemplates Clarissa's behavior, realizing that she's always intent on causing her trouble. Savina admits that she's endured everything to avoid the adults hating her even more, hoping to see her mom one day. However, she questions the point of it all if she's ultimately going to be killed by the prince, and no one is going to protect her. Savina reaches her breaking point, unable to tolerate being treated this way any longer. Savina stands up from her seat, raising the teacup, which startles Clarissa. Clarissa is shocked and asks what Savina thinks she's doing. Savina drops the teacup, which shatters on the ground, and confidently declares that Clarissa is fired. Clarissa stammers in disbelief, asking what Savina thinks she's doing. Savina explains that she fired an employee who caused physical harm to their employer and questions if there's a problem. Clarissa tries to defend herself, stating that it was simply an accident while she was doing her best to teach Savina. She pleads with Savina not to disregard her sincerity in this manner. Savina asserts her authority, insisting that Clarissa address her as Lady Savina. Clarissa is startled by Savina's words. Savina asserts that Clarissa is no longer her teacher since she's been dismissed. Clarissa grits her teeth in disbelief. Savina states that she doesn't think Clarissa has what it takes to be a teacher for someone, causing Clarissa to become anxious. Savina then turns to her maid, Melissa, and instructs her to show Clarissa the way out. Melissa acknowledges Savina and responds with a nervous, "Yes, my lady." Savina then directs Melissa to escort Clarissa out of the room. Melissa hesitantly offers to show Madame Clarissa the way to the door, but Clarissa becomes angry and uses her magic on Melissa, causing her to thud to the ground. Savina becomes nervous, realizing that Clarissa is insane for using magic on an ordinary person. Clarissa scoffs at Savina, insulting her and her mother, saying that Savina doesn't know her place and her actions are inelegant and unsophisticated. She claims to have worked hard to remove traces of Savina's lowly background, but believes her efforts were in vain. Savina reflects on Clarissa's repeated insults towards her mother and her bloodline. Despite this, Savina smiles and taunts Clarissa, asking if she likes Savina's dad a lot. Savina's dad was supposed to marry Madame Clarissa, but he ran away with her mom, causing Madame Clarissa's engagement to be called off. Savina had assumed that Clarissa was bullying her because she was her parents' daughter. However, she finds it strange that Clarissa only ever speaks poorly of her mom. Clarissa is stunned and blushes at Savina's taunt. Savina, using the opportunity to assert herself, suggests that it must have been an arranged marriage between two mage families, implying that Clarissa could have married Savina's father, the Duke, instead of her dad. Savina scoffs at Clarissa, insinuating that if becoming a duchess was what Clarissa wanted, she could have pursued it by marrying the Duke. Clarissa becomes enraged and shouts at Savina, demanding that she shut up and questioning how she could say such things to her. Clarissa warns Savina about the consequences if the former Duke Charlotte finds out about their altercation. Savina is startled by the reminder. Clarissa adopts a stern tone, reminding Savina that she was hired by the former Duke himself and is not like Savina's mother, who was kicked out. Savina wonders about the absolute authority of the former Duke's orders. Savina clenches her fists, determined not to back down. She reminds Clarissa that despite her employment by the former Duke, she holds power too. Savina asserts that it is Clarissa who will be thrown out, not her. Clarissa is shocked by Savina's confidence. Savina continues, questioning whether the former Duke would truly chase out a direct descendant of House Charlotte like herself. Savina expresses her gratitude that her dad chose her mom, suggesting that if he had married someone like Clarissa, he would have been unhappy. Clarissa becomes anxious and urges Savina to stop talking. However, Savina continues, laughing at Clarissa and remarking that she understands why her dad ran away with her mom, leaving Clarissa behind. Clarissa becomes enraged, demanding to know how Savina dares to say such things when she has no idea what happened. She insults Savina, calling her a lowly woman's daughter. Clarissa is on the verge of slapping Savina, causing Savina to wince in fear, believing she's about to be hit. However, to her surprise, she doesn't feel anything. Before Clarissa can follow through, Ben enters the room, startling and making her anxious. Ben questions Clarissa's actions, causing her to nervously try to explain herself. However, Ben's glare silences her, and he orders her to step outside immediately. Clarissa, now scared, obeys his command. Ben instructs Savina to wait in her room while he speaks with Madame Clarissa. Savina nervously wonders if Ben is upset. Clarissa and Ben exit the room. Melissa expresses concern for Savina's well-being, prompting Savina to acknowledge Melissa. Savina realizes that Melissa is the one who went to get the Duke. If her assumptions about the Duke being upset with Madame Clarissa are correct, then Savina is called to Ben's office and is asked to explain what happened earlier. She is surprised and reflects on whether Ben believed Madame Clarissa's story after their conversation. However, Savina realizes that it doesn't matter what Clarissa said. In her opinion, if anyone needs to ask for forgiveness, it's Clarissa, not her. Savina clenches her fists and responds to Ben's question, questioning what there is to explain. Ben questions Savina about why she dismissed Madame Clarissa, citing Clarissa's claim that Savina threw a fit and insulted her because she didn't want to attend her class. Savina asks if Ben believes Clarissa's account. Ben responds that his belief depends on Savina's answer, as he can't make a decision based solely on one side of the story. Savina reflects on her mistake, realizing that she had hoped Ben would take her side, but now understands that she shouldn't have expected it. Savina raises her skirt to reveal her burned leg, prompting Ben to spring up in shock. She then proceeds to explain the cause of her leg burn. It happened during a class on tea etiquette, while she was holding a teacup filled with tea, similar in size to the one before them. Madame Clarissa struck the back of her hand with a stick, criticizing her posture, which startled her and caused her to spill the tea, resulting in the burn. Savina questions whether Madame Clarissa's actions were driven by malice, considering her supposed connection to Savina's father. Ben sighs and sits down, expressing his intention to change Savina's teacher and arrange for her wound to be treated once the doctor returns. He also emphasizes the importance of Savina informing him immediately if something similar happens again. Savina contemplates Ben's words, finding them strange coming from him. She feels that he doesn't truly believe her and reflects on how the real source of her suffocation is the people around her, particularly those who hired Madame Clarissa, including the previous Duke, her grandfather. Savina considers the possibility that the previous Duke intentionally hired someone connected to her father's past, perhaps as a means of control or manipulation. She wonders if complaining about the previous Duke instead of Madame Clarissa would have made a difference, but quickly dismisses the idea of deciding not to get her hopes up. Savina expresses her gratitude for Ben's consideration. Ben informs her that it will take some time to find her a new teacher, due to the busy preparations for the prince's arrival at the manor. He also mentions that Fabian will be returning soon. Savina is startled by the news of Fabian's return, stuttering as she asks, "Fabian is coming back." Savina reflects on Fabian's history of hostility towards her, despite being her cousin and Duke Charlotte's son. She recalls instances where Fabian would manipulate situations to make her look bad or turn others against her. However, she found relief when Fabian returned to the academy, as she only had to be cautious when he visited home. Now, with both the prince and Fabian scheduled to be at the manor, Savina feels anxious about the potential challenges and tensions that may arise. Ben informs Savina that Fabian will be taking a leave of absence from the academy during the prince's stay, even though it will delay his graduation. Savina contemplates the notion of politeness and questions if it's appropriate for her to hide rather than greet the prince. Ben then mentions plans for a family banquet where Lady Annabelle will be invited, emphasizing the importance of Savina attending to introduce their family to her. Savina responds by saying she'll keep quiet to avoid making Lady Annabelle uncomfortable. Ben is speechless for a moment, then dismisses Savina, instructing her to leave. Savina bows and exits the room. Savina reflects on Ben's lack of concern for her well-being and realizes he wasn't angry at Madame Clarissa. She dismisses her feelings, reminding herself that they aren't a real family, and decides not to dwell on it. Instead, she focuses on the immediate task at hand, avoiding the prince and simply surviving the upcoming events. A maid shares the news with her colleagues that Madame Clarissa was fired for allowing Lady Savina to get injured. Another maid expresses disbelief at the revelation. The conversation continues with talk of Madame Clarissa's father asking for forgiveness, but the Duke remaining firm in his decision. A maid voices fear about their own situation, admitting to turning a blind eye to Lady Savina's harassment. There's a collective concern about facing similar consequences to Madame Clarissa. Before they can dwell further, Madame Vanessa enters, catching them off guard. The maids nervously explain that their actions were driven by fear of being discovered for ignoring Lady Savina's mistreatment. Vanessa scoffs at their reasoning, suggesting that if the Duke and others were truly attentive, they would have noticed already. She advises them to treat Lady Savina politely for the time being, emphasizing her status as a recognized member of the Charlotte family by his grace. Melissa applies medication to Savina's burned thigh. Savina realizes she no longer has to attend Madame Clarissa's class and feels relieved that she won't have to see her again. Despite being tormented for so long, she's surprised by how quickly the issue was resolved, but acknowledges it as the best way to be rid of Madame Clarissa. Savina mumbles that it was worth getting hit by her, causing Melissa to flinch in shock. Savina then notices Melissa trembling in fear and realizes that her words were interpreted as a warning. She understands Melissa's fear, as she had often ignored Savina's harassment. However, Savina hadn't expected Melissa to report the incident to the Duke while she was arguing with Madame Clarissa. Nonetheless, Savina concludes that it won't change anything. Savina reassures Melissa not to be afraid and tells her that what she did wasn't so bad, emphasizing that she doesn't have the authority to punish her. Melissa, still tense, apologizes to Savina, expressing her guilt for not intervening earlier. She confesses that she eventually reached a breaking point and reported everything to Madame Vanessa, but was instructed to ignore it. Savina is shocked to hear that Madame Vanessa, the head maid, was aware of the situation. Melissa apologizes again, promising not to ignore anything that could harm Savina in the future. Savina asks Melissa if she can trust her to be on her side from now on and prioritize her orders over those of the current and former dukes. Melissa hesitates to answer and explains that she has a younger sister back home who is the same age as Savina. She admits that whenever Savina was mistreated, it felt as though her own sister was being mistreated, prompting her to agree to follow Savina's instructions. Savina grins at her response and asks if Melissa knows which room the prince will be staying in on the second floor. In the novel, Savina was just an extra appearing only in flashback scenes. She knows how she died, but not why. Savina, limping towards the prince's room, reflects on the previous duke's order for her not to appear before the prince, realizing it won't be easy to avoid him in such a large house over 6 months. As she nears the prince's room, she acknowledges that this is where he will be staying. Savina enters the room. Savina realizes the need to assess how much of the outside is visible from the windows in the room in order to effectively avoid the prince. Peering outside, she notes that the annex where she'll be staying isn't visible from the room, which she considers safer than expected. As she observes 2 maids passing by in the hallway, notice something amiss. One of the maids hears a strange sound from the room and alerts the other. Both maids enter the prince's room, prompting Savina to become scared and hide under the table. One maid asserts that there is nothing unusual in the room and questions if the other maid could have been mistaken. The second maid insists she heard something, but the first suggests it might have just been the wind, and they decide to leave. Savina is startled by their presence but remains hidden. She resolves not to let anyone discover she was there and plans to leave once their footsteps recede. She reflects on the possibility of avoiding the prince for the next 6 months, given that the annex is not visible from his room. Savina considers her advantage of knowing what will happen, believing it gives her a better chance of survival than the real Savina. She hopes to avoid encountering the terrifying psychopath that even the Empress feared when he was a child. She recalls that the male lead is someone capable of doing something horrible, even if he doesn't kill Savina. Despite not wanting to involve more victims, she entertains the possibility of the Empress banishing him to the battlefield, which could offer her a chance to live. Savina notices the elegant yet old furniture in the room kept in perfect condition despite being unused. She wonders whose room it used to be and briefly considers if it could have been her father's room before scoffing at the idea. Suddenly, she hears a tapping sound and realizes there's a tiny space in the desk. Upon investigating, she finds a leather notebook hidden inside. Puzzled by its presence, she licks the book and contemplates its significance. Before she can ponder further, she hears someone's voice alerting her to the presence of another person. Savina quickly hides the book in her clothes, deciding to leave the room and take the notebook with her. Unnoticed, Savina slips out of the prince's room and finds herself wondering why everyone is so busy when Lady Annabelle's arrival is still some time away. Suddenly, she encounters Fabian, who remarks on their reunion without much enthusiasm. Savina becomes nervous as she realizes it's Fabian. Savina realizes that everyone was busy preparing for Fabian's return, unaware that he would be back so soon. She chooses to ignore Fabian and turns away, suggesting he should rest after his long journey. Fabian reacts incredulously, expecting a warmer greeting from a cousin he hasn't seen in a while. He asserts his position as the future duke and implies that Savina should try to win his favor. Savina wonders at the absurdity of Fabian's statement, knowing that her mother's influence, not Fabian's, brought her to the estate. She contemplates the uncertain future, unsure if she will even survive until Fabian assumes the role of duke. Savina responds bluntly, stating that she'll likely be gone before Fabian becomes the duke, so she sees no reason to try to gain his favor. Fabian is shocked by her statement, and Savina asserts that there's nothing for her to gain from pretending to be on good terms with him. Fabian mocks her for finally showing her true colors, recalling her previous silence towards him. Savina sighs, expressing her indifference to his beliefs. She reflects on her impending death and decides that there's no point in tolerating Fabian's behavior if she's going to die anyway. Fabian expresses frustration and yells at Savina, suggesting that an ungrateful girl like her should be sent to a boarding school in the mountains. Savina gets an idea at the mention of a boarding school. Fabian arrogantly assumes she wouldn't like the idea, but Savina unexpectedly expresses excitement, surprising Fabian. She reflects hopefully, considering asking Fabian to relay her request to the Duke to send her to a boarding school. Savina believes that moving to a rural area would help her avoid encounters with the prince. Additionally, she sees it as a step towards independence from the Charlotte family once she becomes an adult. She entertains the idea that she could potentially succeed in life by applying the knowledge she gained from the novel. Savina shrugs, acknowledging the rarity of her agreement with Fabian and encouraging him to inform the Duke. Annoyed by her response, Fabian questions her belief that he's incapable of taking action, asserting that kicking her out wouldn't be a challenge. Savina wonders why Fabian hesitates, prompting him to stammer a response. Savina reiterates her stance, calling him an idiot for prolonging the conversation if he lacks the courage to act or move. In a fit of rage, Fabian grabs Savina's hand, causing her to fall with a thud, eliciting a cry of pain from her. He notices Savina's burned thigh and becomes anxious, demanding to know what happened. As Savina checks her back and realizes the notebook is still secure, she's relieved that it didn't fall out and is glad she tied it tightly around her waist. Despite her pain, she reflects on Fabian's unusual concern, finding it unlike him to make such a fuss. Savina explains that Madame Clarissa hit her hand during a tea etiquette class, causing her to spill a cup of tea. Fabian expresses outrage at Madame Clarissa's actions, questioning how she dared to hurt someone she was supposed to serve. Savina clarifies that Madame Clarissa served Fabian's father, not her, and questions why Fabian is upset when she's the one who got hurt. She notes Fabian's apparent concern for her well-being. Fabian, startled, quickly excuses himself, denying any worry or upset. He claims his concern was merely about Savina potentially staying at the estate indefinitely. He expresses disdain for Savina's counter mother and worries that any scars on her body would further diminish her marriage prospects. Savina scoffs at Fabian's excuse and realizes that she was foolish to think he was genuinely concerned about her. She reflects on Fabian's attitude, speculating that he will likely continue making such remarks even after her death. Fabian, startled by Savina's mention of death and questioning her sanity, demands an explanation. Savina advises him to lower his voice and announces her intention to rest in her room. She instructs Fabian to inform the Duke to send her away and suggests she wouldn't mind being detained in a psychiatric hospital. Savina leaves, leaving Fabian perplexed by her behavior. He wonders if she's mocking him and shouts her to stop. Savina reflects on her strained relationship with her supposed family. Upon entering her room, Melissa greets her, and Savina requests a cup of tea. Melissa, stunned by Fabian's presence, quickly closes the door as Fabian knocks rapidly. Concerned, Melissa asks if something happened with Lord Fabian. Savina assures her that Fabian's behavior is not uncommon and asks for the tea once Fabian leaves. Melissa expresses sympathy for Savina's situation. Savina retrieves the book from Prince's room and decides to examine it. Meanwhile, Fabian screams and forcefully knocks on her door, demanding entry and accusing her of ignoring him. Ben arrives at the scene and questions Fabian's presence there. Fabian hesitates but quickly recovers, putting on a smile and claiming he was planning to see his father upon arrival. Ben, however, is not convinced and sighs, remarking on the echoes of Fabian's screams throughout the manor. He instructs Fabian to stop wasting time and follow him, to which Fabian reluctantly agrees. Melissa brings Savina her tea as she flips through the pages of the book. Savina thanks her for the tea. Melissa expresses curiosity about the notebook, noting that she's never seen it before. Savina lies, claiming she found it outside and was reading it to find clues about its owner. Melissa inquires if she discovered the owner's identity. Savina closes the book and holds it affectionately, smiling happily, and replies that she did. In the morning, all the servants clamor, urging each other to stop lazing around and get moving. They inquire about the preparation of dinner ingredients and ask where to put various items. Sleeping Savina, frustrated by the commotion, wonders why everyone has been making such a fuss all morning and why they're preparing for dinner so soon. She questions the significance of Lady Annabelle's visit, realizing that it actually is a big deal. Duke Charlotte's wife died due to an epidemic 10 years ago, and the former Duke Charlotte was displeased with his son's prolonged single status. Consequently, House Charlotte is now preparing to welcome the Duke's new wife, Annabelle, following the arrangement made by the previous Duke. Melissa enters Savina's room and informs her it's time to get dressed. Savina reluctantly tosses her blanket aside, acknowledging the instruction. Feeling tired, she reflects on her restless night, realizing she didn't sleep well at all. She had hoped to sleep in, considering she no longer has to take Madame Clarisse's classes. Suddenly, the bandage on Savina's leg slips off. She wonders aloud, expressing concern that the bandage has come undone again. Surprised, she notices her burned thigh. Savina then asks Melissa if Dr. Eugenia came by while she was sleeping, but Melissa informs her that the doctor hasn't returned yet. Perplexed, Savina mumbles to herself about how it could have happened. She then tells Melissa that she can get ready on her own and encourages her to leave. Melissa hesitates but eventually complies, expressing concern before departing and offering assistance if needed. After Melissa leaves, Savina is surprised to see that her leg burn has healed. She wonders aloud how the wound could have healed without Dr. Eugenia's return, as there is no one in the manor with such healing abilities. Savina is puzzled by the sudden healing of her wound. There are two kinds of healing power. One is divine power, which priests use, and the other is mana, which mages use. However, regeneration and death are the domains of God, and mages with healing power are extremely rare, so healing power is often regarded as something that only priests can use. As such, many people relied on priests to treat their illnesses, but the only way to get treatment was to pay them a large sum of money. House Charlotte was able to employ a mage with healing power as his personal doctor because the Duke had the resources and influence to hire one. Savina considers the situation, realizing that she and Melissa are the only ones who have been in the room since the morning. She decides to check her healing power by cutting her finger with a knife. To her surprise, the cut heals instantly. Savina is astonished and struggles to believe what she has just witnessed. She wonders if her power is finally revealing itself. One's special abilities usually appear naturally around the age of 10, but this isn't always the case. If your ability doesn't manifest, you must place a mana stone nearby that contains a large amount of mana, or obtain it from a competent mage and artificially create a path for mana to flow through your body. Savina wonders why her power is manifesting now, considering that nothing happened when Madame Clarissa sneered at her while giving her mana dosage. Just then, Melissa knocks on the door and informs Savina that His Grace has asked her to come downstairs. Savina considers waiting until Dr. Eugenia returns, as she is a mage with healing power and might know what's happening with her. She contemplates the possibility of using her newfound power to cure her mother's illness and ultimately escape from her current situation. Savina encounters Fabian in the hallway. Fabian scoffs at her choice of clothes, but Savina ignores him and walks away without giving an answer. Fabian trails behind her, insisting that ignoring him won't work because he knows her true intentions. He accuses her of wanting to go to a rural area and be treated like a proper noble lady, aiming to act like a leader among innocent country girls, since everyone knows who she is. Savina responds curtly, telling him to think whatever he wants. Fabian tells Savina to wake up, insinuating that there are indeed people in the countryside. He warns her that rumors will spread on her first day at the school, and she'll spend the whole semester being excluded by everyone before returning. Just then, Ben arrives, questioning what they are chatting about. Both Savina and Fabian flinch upon seeing him. Fabian shrugs off Ben's question, claiming he was just talking to his cute cousin since he hasn't seen her for a while. Ben dismisses Fabian's statement, instructing them to come because Lady Annabelle will be arriving soon. After some moments, Annabelle enters the manor. Annabelle introduces herself as Annabelle Rose Maria and expresses her honor at being invited to Eberton House. Ben holds her hand and kisses it, expressing pleasure in having her there. Grandfather acknowledges that it's been quite some time. Annabelle then addresses His Grace, inquiring about his well-being. Savina wonders about Lady Annabelle, recalling rumors that her husband passed away a few years ago. Despite this, she observes that there's no visible indication that this is their second marriage. She reflects on Lady Annabelle's renowned beauty in high society and the long-standing reputation of the Charlotte family for their attractive features. Annabelle expresses her pleasure at meeting Lord Fabian, praising his reputation as a bright and capable student at the prestigious Royal Academy. Fabian responds with a smile, expressing his gratitude for her recognition and gently pecking her hand as a gesture of respect. Annabelle acknowledges his gentlemanly behavior with appreciation. Annabelle glances at Savina, causing Savina to be surprised. Savina then curtsies and begins to express her honor at meeting Annabelle, but Annabelle ignores her and turns to address Ben instead. She expresses her hunger and suggests going inside. Savina is shocked by Annabelle's behavior, wondering if she was completely ignored. Savina reflects on her parents' marriage, which wasn't officially accepted by the Charlotte family due to her mother's status as a maid. This societal perception of her as her father's illegitimate child explains why both the Charlotte family and outsiders like Madame Clarissa treat her with disdain. Consequently, Savina isn't surprised that Lady Annabelle is ignoring her. Savina reflects while eating, finding solace in the delicious food amidst the discomfort of the dinner. She observes the dynamics at the table, noting the forced nature of the remarriage imposed by the previous Duke Charlotte. While the former Duke and Lady Annabelle engage in lively conversation, the current Duke Charlotte appears disinterested. Savina questions the necessity of the remarriage, criticizing the outdated belief that widowed men must remarry, considering it a traditional and old-fashioned mindset. Ben's gaze falls on Savina, who becomes puzzled by his sudden attention. He questions Savina about her studies, noting her absence from classes. Savina, taken aback, responds that she's been reading various books to stay prepared for upcoming classes. She wonders about Ben's unexpected interest in her studies. Ben asks what she has read so far. Savina responds, stating that she has read a book titled The Dynamics of Geography and Economics. She also mentions that she has been conducting a light analysis of an article discussing changes to the tax law. Savina knows that it's an advanced book for her age, but believes that once she leaves the house, she needs to start earning money right away. Annabelle observes that Lady Savina appears to be very bright based on what she's heard. She questions whether Lady Savina has a tutor to help manage her studies. Ben explains that they fired her teacher a few days ago due to some personal issues, but they will be looking for a new one soon. Annabelle expresses surprise, questioning the necessity of it. She scoffs, suggesting that given Lady Savina's age, it might be better for her to attend school and spend time with friends her own age. She mentions the availability of high-quality boarding schools nowadays. Ben halts, questioning the idea of boarding schools. Annabelle asserts that there is no reason for them to continue raising Lady Savina. Savina wonders silently, acknowledging that Annabelle might have a point. She admits to herself that she would love to go to a boarding school. As she contemplates, she realizes there is one more person who wants to kick her out of the place. She stares at Fabian, wondering why he isn't saying anything to support Lady Annabelle. Fabian whispers, asking what she means. Savina ponders whether he is slow to understand the situation or if he is simply being rebellious. Annabelle addresses Ben, acknowledging their kindness but criticizing Lord Liam for his lack of responsibility as an heir and for making a wrong choice due to a mistake. Arrogantly, she continues eating, remarking on the heartbreaking nature of the situation and the pressure that can lead to life-altering decisions. There's an awkward silence until Grandfather clears his throat, prompting Ben to address Lady Annabelle. Startled, Annabelle hastily explains that she only spoke out of sympathy for the situation and didn't intend any offense. Annabelle mockingly glances at Savina, asserting that Lord Liam did nothing wrong and merely trusted the wrong person. Savina endures the remark with clenched fists. Annabelle continues, insinuating that a commoner shamelessly seduced her master and questions the legitimacy of the child, suggesting she may not even be Lord Liam's daughter. Ben interrupts, addressing Lady Annabelle, and suggests she's had enough to eat and should head back. Confused, Annabelle questions what he means, but Ben sternly smiles, instructing her to get up and leave the table. Anxious, Annabelle becomes uneasy. Ben instructs the maid, Josephina, to pack up Lady Annabelle's things and prepare her carriage. Panicked, Annabelle tries to cover her tracks, apologizing and claiming she didn't mean to upset anyone. Ben interrupts, stating that the wedding will not happen and suggests ending the dinner. Shocked, Annabelle springs up from her chair, demanding to know what he means and accusing him of cruelty over such a minor issue. Nervously, she turns to the grandfather, hoping for support, but he remains silent, not responding to her plea. Ben sighs, expressing his belief that the most important virtue in a marriage is knowing how to respect the other person. He questions who made the decision to allow Savina to live in the house. Annabelle flinches at his words. Ben continues, stating that in that regard he doesn't think they are a good match. Savina, unable to understand what's happening, wonders about the situation. She interprets the Duke was offended by Lady Annabelle's judgment of his family, considering that what she said wouldn't have bothered the Duke she knows. Annabelle defends herself, stating that Savina is the daughter of a maid. Hearing this, Savina becomes upset. Ben counters firmly, revealing that Savina is also the daughter of his older brother, Liam Charlotte, and the maid Annabelle insulted is the woman his brother loved his entire life.